let's dive into it. Let's talk about my 2022 pickups. So, all in all, before we get into the top 10 specifically, just last year, I'll kind of give you a little summary. 2022 was kind of a weird year for me. A lot of really my personal wants or things I thought I wanted to get, things I was chasing, what have you, they kind of got put on the back burner because Como just had a lot of opportunities to buy a lot of books. I spent well into the 5 figures on collections last year, bought upwards of, I don't even know, somewhere between 20 and 25,000 comics last year. Best I can just kind of ballpark it. So Drew kind of took a back seat because Como was just going crazy. Now, that said, sometimes you buy collections and you kind of get high on your own supply a little bit. I peel a little of this, a little of that out. And you'll see some of that in here. But that's kind of 2022 in a nutshell. I didn't buy anything crazy. I wouldn't say there was anything that was like Grails level that I picked up. But I bought some really cool stuff that's been on my want list for a while. And I think you'll see some of that as we get into some more specifics. So I just kind of did some summary pages. We got 2 slides to cover here. First up, as you can see, is Vault of Horror 35, which this is a book I talk about quite a bit. So let me get her on camera here. I've had this one for a while, and a copy of this issue for a while. But the thing about this particular copy is it's an upgrade. So last spring, a local auction house had an auction. They got an original owner, or well, maybe not original, but they had a massive EC collection that they picked up out of St. Louis. And when I say massive, I mean basically everything short of the first 3 or 4 issues of every new trend EC title was in here. And there were duplicates of some of this stuff. Like, when was the last time you looked at a collection that had 2 Crime Suspense 20s, 2 Crime Suspense 22s, the most gorgeous Mad 1 I've ever seen in my life? It was just ridiculous. And a lot of the prices of this auction reflected the level of the books that they were. I was able to scratch out a few, but I actually sat down and did the math. This one collection sold for over $60,000 that night. It was just insane. But I was able to upgrade my Vault of Horror 35 and with the copy that came out of that collection. It presents really well. A press could get some of the non-color breaking, just like creases and indents and stuff out of it. But I don't know. I don't feel right slabbing ECs. I'll buy them slabbed, but I usually don't sub those. But happy to have upgraded this book. And if you don't know, it's a great holiday theme. Johnny Craig cover. Also, one of the stories in it, All Through the House, was one of the earliest, if not the first, EC story that was adapted for the Tales from the Crypt TV show. I'm a Johnny Craig guy. It was a no-brainer for me. It's one of my favorite EC covers. To kind of go with that as well, the next book, Web 118, this guy right here, it's a book I've had for a while, I'll be honest. Not this exact copy, but I've had a Web 118 for over a decade. It took me longer to get one than I figured it would, honestly. But I nabbed this from a buddy of mine. He was selling it last, I think January is when I bought it. So I've had it for right at about a year. But it's a 9.6. It was a really good price. And, I think I paid $150 for it. Something like that. But again, just a nice upgrade into the 9.6 white pages. I grew up during the Clone Saga era, so I kind of have a bit of a soft spot for those books, and I've always thought the Scarlet Spider costume design was just fantastic. So it was one of those books I wanted to have a really nice high grade copy of it slab. The raw one I have is pretty nice, but still, why not? Let's let's upgrade that. And if I want to hang it on the wall and look at it every once in a while, I can do that. Next on the list, this is a good example of where the weirdness starts. Of course, I grew up, I was born in the 80s, grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. Nintendo was life back in the day. If you guys weren't around, that's just the way it was. You played NES every opportunity you could, and then Super Nintendo, it just went on from there. But Nintendo Power was how we learned how to do things back before the internet was around. So it was always one of those things I kind of wanted to get. And, it's not the prettiest copy you'll ever see. It may be one of the ugliest copies you'll ever see. But my buddy Eric, who owns STL Comics over in St. Louis, had this come in. Everything's there. The poster's there. The inserts are there. It's 100% complete, well read, well loved. Perfect copy for me because I generally don't get too hung up on condition. I would rather have one of everything than the best of anything. So having a 100% complete Nintendo Power #1 was just exactly the nostalgia trip I needed. I think I actually picked this up the same day that I picked up the Web 118. So that was a good day for me. Obviously, if two of the books I picked up that day make the top 10 and were, had the whole rest of the year to be knocked out of the top by other books. To kind of keep it going, as you can see there at number 7, we have Blip #1, which if you don't know what this is, Blip is actually it was put out by Marvel. It's a video game magazine, and it's the first comic book appearance of Mario. So it's a comic-sized book. They actually do call it a magazine, but it was just back in those early days of video gaming where, the culture didn't really know where it was going to go, what it was going to do. But like I said, grew up on NES. Mario was life. So when I picked up a copy of that in St. Louis, I think it was last spring in a trade deal, I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to hang on to that. I think it was actually Mrs. Como that convinced me to hold on to Blip. Just, those membranes are strong when it comes to Mario and the NES life. Next book in our number 6 position here. It's a book I've been looking for a long time. I remember seeing it in an LCS, probably in the late aughts, 08, 09, something like that. It was one of those books that was just like, yeah, that's cool, but I didn't really care to drop the coin on it. And I don't know that I've seen a copy for sale since in person. So when I bought the 17K collection that we're going to talk about here in a bit, there's a lot of really interesting things in there. And one of those things was the complete first and second volumes of Aracell's Men in Black. So if you're wondering, yes, this is the same Men in Black that the Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith movie was ultimately adapted from or adjacent to. Just one of those really weird 80s, 90s kind of indie stories. Of course, the movie's coming out in the mid 90s like they did. I would love to have $1 for every time I've watched Men in Black or a Men in Black sequel. I could take the rest of the month off and be perfectly happy. So when I was flipping through that collection and we came across that, I probably embarrassed myself by some of the sounds that came out of me when I saw what that was. So super excited to have Men in Black #1 in the PC at this point. Now we're up to the top 5, and kicking off the top 5 is my birthday present to myself. I bought this last fall. This is Tales from the Crypt 33. Pardon the Mylar. It makes viewing a little tough. But this is from December 52, January 53. So this thing is 70 years old. Now, I didn't realize that until I just saw it. But what makes this particular issue special is it's the origin of the Crypt Keeper. It's a really weird story. You might have imagined that. But the title of the story is called Lower Birth. It was adapted for the TV show, and it's just as weird to watch it on television as it was to read it in a book. And it was also like one of the last 4 or 5 Tales from the Crypt issues I need. I think I'm down to 3 now. And they came up at a great price on eBay. I'm like, yeah, happy birthday to me. So the cool thing about this is when I bought that Vault of 435 in the spring, I took my undercopy and put it in the inventory for Como, and I sold it in Kansas City. Well, when I get this book in the mail, let's see if I can get it to focus in here. Make it big for you. Oops. One more option. When I get this book in the mail, there's a note on it. It says, hey, I'm the guy who bought your Vault of 435 at Planet. So small world there, everybody. The comic community, we may be scattered out, but it's a small world when it really comes down to it. So what were the chances of that? But that was just kind of a cherry on top of that story. So that was pretty cool. Happy to have that book, and still hunting for those last couple of Tales from the Crypts when I can find them at the right time and right price. Next up, number 4. This is a pickup from Planet Comic-Con last year. There's a couple books like that. This is Kamiko Primer number 2. It's the first appearance of Grendel. Of course, he was created by Matt Wagner, and Wagner will tell you not to buy this book. Don't read this book. It's crap. It's just not worth your time. But I didn't care. I wanted one, and I actually had a really good buddy who was the manager and co-owner of my LCS, where I basically cut my teeth in learning the comics game, and Grendel was his favorite character in the world. And unfortunately, right before I launched the channel, you could probably make the argument to say that I launched the channel because of this. We lost him in November of 2019, and ever since that happened, Kamiko Primer 2 was just a book I wanted to have in my collection in remembrance of him, essentially. Again, it didn't need to be the best presenting copy. It didn't need to be super high grade. And when a customer we have who comes to Kansas City every year always has the coolest stuff. If you go on my website, there's a picture of me holding a Gobbledygook number 1. It's the same guy. He just has the coolest stuff. But we did a trade deal. I got that. I think a Ninja Turtles 2 second print for some Silver Age X-Men stuff. He was super happy. I was super happy. And yeah, it was a good trade, good deal. Now, into the top 3. Sometimes you just put stuff out into the universe, and the universe acknowledges you. Sometimes you put it out and it just flips you the bird, whatever. Planet Comic-Con 2022 was one of those times that I got the nod. That primer that I just showed walked up. The number 3 book walked up. The number 2 book walked up. Just completely random. And I'll get into that. But the number 3 book is Maximum Carnage number 1, which you may recognize it. It's the same cover art as the video game. So whether you were playing this on SNES, Sega Genesis, I want to say it was even arcade for a while. This is the art. And it's actually Bill Sienkiewicz cover art. He painted the different characters and they just imposed them over that background shot. But this wasn't a book you could buy. This was a giveaway item that was supposed to come with the limited edition versions of these games. Well, this customer, this viewer on the channel, he was actually the first guy to ever ask me for my autograph after I started the channel. Really nice guy. Came up and he pulls out a stack of slabs from his book and he hands them to me. And it's a pile of these freaking Maximum Carnage number 1s. I've seen like 3 in my entire life. And this dude rolls up and he's like, oh, here you go. There's like this pile of slabs. I think he said he had 198, a couple 96s, some 94s, whatever. The story is he nabbed a stack of them as a kid from, I think it was Toys R Us. They were supposed to manage it. You buy a game, you get a copy. Well, they just left the copies laying there. He's like, well, I got that. And he held on to them all these years and finally decided to sub them and got all those great grades. So it was just a super awesome story. He did really well on the books. Plus, he got to keep one. I was floored, just super happy to finally have one. And really just at that point, I think this was the last book that just kind of fell into my lap at Planet Comic-Con last year. So at that point, I was just, stick a fork in me. I'm done. Let's go home. It's not going to get any better. The one that just kind of made me laugh, as far as, the universe just giving on occasion, was the number 2 book. And that is the Marvel Resident Evil #1. It was a Capcom and Marvel co-effort. It was a giveaway. Obviously, it's free there. And it's just not a book I see very often. I love the Resident Evil video games. I would stay up till 2, 3 in the morning playing them all the time. I remember, like, Resident Evil 2 was the first game I ever actively awaited. Like, I had the pre-order in. I was sitting there waiting for this game to come out, just like, chomping at the bit. So I've always wanted one of these books. I'd never seen one. I was sitting there having a conversation with my buddy Tom from MSG Comics. We always set up together at a lot of shows, but Planet especially. I'll be on one side of the end cap, he'll be on the other. We're all pals, our families, wives and stuff. We all hang out and have a good time. And we were just talking. I'm like, the book I'd like to get is Resident Evil #1. And I kid you not, 20 minutes later, he sent a guy over to my booth that had walked up. I was like, hey, I want to sell this. I just look at him and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Because I couldn't believe it. And obviously, I wanted the book, and the deal was good enough that I was going to do it for sure. And honestly, it's just something I don't see that often. I would have paid whatever, but I think it wound up being a pretty good deal regardless. So just that was kind of the third and final straw, or one of the 3 just unbelievable happenings at that show. So I left with some really great stuff, but not the stuff I went to the show with the intention of bringing home. Just absolutely crazy. And then my #1 pickup for 2022 is this Evil Ernie #1. Let me go ahead and get that back here. Of course, this is from Eternity Comics, created by Brian Pulido. First appearance of Evil Ernie. Got some trade tower action back there. First appearance of Evil Ernie. First appearance of Lady Death. And kind of the story with that one, why that book appeals to me, is in the 90s, before the internet was really a thing, we had Wizard magazine. Wizard loved some of these indie characters, just the small press stuff, the weird stuff that was coming out back in the day. And Evil Ernie and Lady Death were characters that just really caught my eye and stuck with me. And it's also not your run-of-the-mill stuff. Like, you don't come across Eternity Comics books every day. And I've seen a couple sets of Evil Ernie come through St. Louis or Kansas City or whenever, and I just never had the opportunity to get them. So this was one of the things when I first started talking with the owner of the 17K collection. I have it right here. We were on the phone and spent like 45 minutes on the phone. He's just reading through the different things that he had, and he started with The Walking Dead. Then we talked to TMNT, and the third thing he said was, I have Evil Ernie 1 through 5. All right. So I was literally 3 lines into being told what was in this collection, and I'm like, I'm in. Let's do this. So super, super happy to have that book. And of course, I've got the number 2. I kept the whole set. Just really happy to have that. So there you have it. That's my top 10 from 2022. I could easily go and do some honorable mentions because I was just sitting here thinking while I was talking. I also picked up a Scud the Disposable Assassin #1 last May when I was in Tulsa. That's a book I've been after for forever. So again, it was one of those years where I didn't knock any grails off the list. I didn't land, like 4 or 5 figure book. I just got some really cool stuff that I've been looking for a while, and stuff that I enjoy. And I think that's ultimately what it's all about. These top 10 lists don't have to be a flex of my grail for the year's bigger than your grail. I think that's one of the things we just need to focus on moving forward as we come out of this crazy, just like boom cycle of, where comics have been the last couple of years. Just getting back, who gives a crap what somebody says about the stuff you enjoy? If you enjoy it, you're excited that you found it. That's what's important. So that's my top 10. And stay tuned, because we're going to head over to my top 10 want list for 2023.